Hello everyone, welcome to another session on Introduction to Television and Cinema. In this session, we are going to summarize the entire fourth module. I have done that with the third module, so I am doing the same thing with the fourth module, so that you will have a brief outline of this particular module, like what is it all about. So the first thing is that the entire module, or you can see the fourth chapter, the fourth module has got 6 components. Okay, first section is the introduction section. Second is about the Hindi cinema, or you can say the Bollywood cinema. Though there is a brief, a very short paragraph about parallel cinema just prior to the Hindi cinema or Bollywood cinema, you can see that it is discussed extensively in the session next to the Bollywood cinema. Okay, as titled as New Wave Cinema. So that is probably the third component of this particular module, third section that you have to study in this particular module. Then we have FTII, Film and Television Institute of India, and lastly we have the Masters of Indian Cinema, where we are going to discuss where we have discussed about 7 Masters of Indian Cinema. Okay, I hope I am clear. We have an introduction, so we have got 5 different sections in this particular module. There's a small mistake, I mentioned it as 6, but it is 5. Okay, so first is the introduction, second one is about Hindi cinema or Bollywood cinema, third one is about parallel cinema, or you can say new wave cinema, fourth one is about Film and Television Institute of India, and fifth one is about Masters of Indian Cinema, where we'll discuss about, or we have discussed about 7 Masters of Indian Cinema. Okay, so that is it. Now, what all are the things that we have discussed in the introduction? So first thing that we have discussed in the introduction part is about the first show of the Lumia brothers. In my textbook, in page number 83, I don't know about yours. Okay, where in the first paragraph we have seen that Lumia brothers representatives held the first public showing of their films in Mumbai at Watson Hotel on 7th of July 1896. Okay, so that is the thing. It's about the first show of this particular kind in India. That is the first style that we have discussed. Now the second one is about the first Indian, okay, the first by an Indian, the first film, or you can say something of that kind as that of a film by an Indian, where we have seen the movie is Sri Pundalik by Dada Saheb Torne. Okay, so that is the second idea that we have discussed. Okay, now the third point in the introduction part is about the first film by an Indian in India. Okay, with regard to Sri Pundalik, the problem was it is not considered as the first Indian film because the cameraman was an Englishman. Okay, so and the entire cinema, it was processed, the film was processed in London, and because of that we don't consider it as the first Indian film. Now the third point that we have discussed in the introduction part was the first cinema by an Indian in India, and that was Raja Harishchandra of Dada Saheb Phalke. Okay, and the rest of the things Now the fourth idea that we have discussed in this particular section, it was about the first talkies. The first sound movie, the first talkies in India, and that is Alam Ara. And after that we have seen as the fifth point in the introduction part, we have seen the first color film. The first color film is Kisan Kanya. Okay, and the last one, the sixth one in the introduction that we have discussed was the first Indian film to be screened at an international film festival, and the name of the movie was Sant Tukara. Clear with that? So these are the major points that we have discussed in the introduction part. Okay, so we have seen, we talked about the first show, the first by an Indian, the first by an Indian in India. Then we have seen, like, the first talkie, the first color film, and the first movie to be screened at an international film festival. It was, the Venice Film Festival. We talked about the Venice Film Festival. I hope I am clear. Okay. Now the second most important concept that we have discussed is about the Bollywood cinema, okay, or you can say the Hindi cinema. Though cinema, in its initial phase originated in Mumbai, but Bengal was like a very important seat of cinema. You can see that commercial cinema slowly picked up the scene, and Mumbai turned out to be the hot seat of Indian cinema. Okay, and in Bollywood cinema, we have discussed about the different stages. The cinema, Hindi cinema in 1940s, then Hindi cinema in 1950s, then in 1957 we have Mother India. Then in Hindi cinema, what happened to Hindi cinema in 1960s? Okay, and in 1970s, where we talked about the angry young men kind of movies, and the emergence of Amitabh Bachchan. Okay, then we have 1980s. Hindi cinema has become one of the largest producer of cinema in the world. 1990s, we have seen this like the Khans era, the three Khans era. Then there is a kind of highly commercialization of cinema that happened in the first decade of the 21st century, and from the second decade of the 20th century, like 2010 onwards, you can see there are so many changes that are coming to the Hindi cinema, or you can say the Bollywood cinema. Okay, so this I should say is like a brief outline into the Bollywood cinema. So these are the major things that we have discussed under that particular section called Hindi cinema or Bollywood cinema. I hope I am clear. Now the most important one, and that is the parallel cinema in India, or you can say the new wave cinema in India. Okay, new wave cinema.